You're listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
And now, here's your host.
Welcome back to the program. I'm Zev Brenner. I think he's becoming a regular on our broadcast. He's written some fascinating books for him. He keeps on writing new stuff, and we're always going to keep on having Rabbi Daniel J. Glatstein joins us, the Rav of Kehilas, Teferis Mordechai in Cedarhurst. He's a Maggid Shir. You can catch him on Torah anytime, and as well as podcasting. His latest books is a series in Hebrew called the Maggid Harakia, just came out with Bereishis, and we think we last had him on for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur with a book that came out, and I believe Rabbi Glatstein Hanukkah is in the offing too, right?
Yeah, well, Hanukkah is also it's out for Art Scroll. We will discuss that in the weeks ahead. Yeah,
and before you know it, it'll be Hanukkah.
Yeah,
the way time flies these days. So I always like you have some original concepts, and actually Bereishis is through Toldos. I believe Shmos will be the next one coming out, and then you'll finish Bereishis later on. So there's so much to talk about in the book of Bereishis, and so tell us, what is there a particular theme that you like to harp on?
Well, the general principle of the sefer is I don't like same old. So you're not going to find material here and say, oh yeah, I know that already. I heard that before. It's pretty much all original material. Like to take the same concepts. In other words, one of the major themes of Bereishis and Shemais is Adam HaRishon not only started in the Garden of Eden, but he also started in a virtual Beis HaMikdash. You know, these keruvim, the keruvim in the Mishkan that God rested on, actually, there's a Targum Yonas ben Uziel. Those were the original keruvim in the Garden of Eden that were flashing the sword to make sure Adam did not come in. That is the original Aron or keruvim that God rested there in the Garden of Eden on those keruvim. And not until we built the Mishkan did we ever revert back to that status of the Garden of Eden. So those were...
Are you saying that the keruvim that stood guard in Gan Eden actually ended up moving to the base of Mikdash?
Well, at least the ones in the Mikdash were supposed to be a replica or a representation of those keruvim in Gan Eden. Yeah, that's what the Targum Yonasan says. And it's interesting. Many of the ingredients in the Mishkan came from the Garden of Eden. The Targum says they brought the Avnei Shayham and the Avnei Mulim from the Garden of Eden. So it's all working to get back to the Garden of Eden. That's the whole, we were thrown out. That's the story of Sefer Bereishis, and Sefer Shemais is returning there. And, when we say Hashivenu Hashem Elech v'neshuv chadesh yamenu kekedem, doesn't just mean bring us back to yesteryear. It means bring us back to Adam and Chava in the Garden of Eden.
So how are we doing as far as getting back to the Garden of Eden, to Gan Eden?
We've taken a lot of detours.
I think probably one of the best ways to get to the Garden of Eden, Gan Eden, would be perhaps if we had more unity, more appreciation one to the other, Hakaras Hatov, recognition of good done, judging people favorably. I think these are all important concepts, which I know were alluded to in different parts of Bereishis, or maybe that's the one way to get back to the Garden of Eden.
Yeah, well, it all started with the fruit. It all started.
What was the fruit? Which is your favorite? When there are many different thoughts about what the fruit was.
So here's a good one. The Gemara brings three opinions. The Gemara brings an opinion. It was wheat, it was chita, and based on that, we have lechem mishnah on Shabbos. Based on that, we have matzah on Pesach. There's an opinion that it was gefen. It was a
wine, grapes.
And actually, what's interesting is that the Or HaChaim HaKadosh writes that why would God first tell Adam, you could eat from all of the fruits, but you can't eat this way? Then why did he say you could eat all the fruits? So it's not all the fruits. So he said, really, all the fruits were permitted. Even the Eitz Hadas was permitted. God wanted him to eat the grape, but at the right time. He was supposed to make kiddush on that grape at the proper time, but he ate it prematurely. So what Adam did was actually, the first Kiddush club, and he look what he brought to the world. So I like to say that go ahead, have your Kiddush club and reenact the original sin and everything that that it brought about. But according to this view, it was wine that Adam HaRishon partook of prematurely, and that's why we have Daled Kosos on Pesach, and many Svarim say that's why every manner of holiness is always kicked off with a glass of wine. And then there's a third opinion. It was the fig, because when God said, Adam, how do you know that you're unclothed? So he made alei te'ena. He wanted to repair with the same fruit that he sinned with. So we have these three different fruits. But Ben Ish Chai writes that it was one tree that had all three fruits, and is alluded to in the word tachog. Tachog. 3 times a year we celebrate tachog, te'ena, chita, gefen. And then there's a fourth opinion that it was an esrog.
Right, there was that, and the reason why they say it was an esrog, because they say all the earth rebelled against God. There was supposed to be bear fruits that had the bark was supposed to taste like the fruit, and they rebelled. The only one that had the taste of the bark and the fruit was the esrog.
Yeah.
No, nobody says it was an apple, though, right?
No, it definitely wasn't that, except for Steve Jobs.
So how did the apple become the proof? We look at all the translations that talk about the apple. Where the apple get into the mix here?
Yeah, look, it's good advertising for Apple stock, and
Get the apple and the honey. By the way, when you mention about the fact that it was grapes and wine, maybe the reason why Noah planted, the first thing he planted when he got out of the ark was a vine, was maybe he wanted to bring back the taste of Gan Eden.
Yeah, he seemed to have wanted to rectify that sin. What's interesting is, if you look carefully in Rashi, and I actually thought that this morning, Rashi says he planted kerem. Rashi says zemoros lakachimo. He took a vineyard with him, and fig. And Noach is criticized. He should have planted something else. Maybe that means he should have also brought the third thing. Why did he stop short? If only he would have brought the third item as well, he could have rectified all three.
I saw another interesting thought as to why he planted a vine and why he should not be cast, should be looked down upon for doing so, is that you have a situation where on the mizbech, on the altar, you can use any wood except for the wood from the olive and the wood from the vine, from where you make grapes come from. And the reason being that the dove brought the olive branch. What's the significance of the dove bringing the olive branch? Is telling Noah that he should be humble, that the reason why he was saved was because of the same concept of the olive. What's the concept? Is that you don't burn the parent in deference to the children. The children, which is the olives or the wine on the mizbeach, is you don't hurt the parent, which is which gave birth to it, which Moshe Rabbeinu used as the argument when God was angry at Aaron for the golden calf and he wanted to destroy Aaron. He says, in the sake of his children, you can't destroy Aaron. So that's the message. So what the dove was really telling Noah is that you're saved because of your children. Elah told us Noah, that's the reason why Noah was saved. Hashem found Noah found favor in the eyes of God. Why? Elah told us Noah, because of his children. So that was the lesson that he gave. So the dove only gave him the olive. So when Noah got out of the teva, he could have said the whole world was saved because of me. He could have been arrogant, but he was humble and he planted the other item, which is the vine, to show that he is humble, that he learned that lesson, that he was saved because of his children.
Right. Very nice.
So another way of looking at it.
Put it in the book. Yeah.
In the next one.
Yeah.
I'm sure, let me ask, when you're writing a sefer and you're writing a commentary, I'm sure you have many things that you like to put in that you don't put in. So how do you choose and say, this I like, this I'm not going to put in, when I'm sure you have so many creative thoughts?
Right. Okay. So there are a few guidelines. One guideline is that not every answer that answers a question is authorized to be said. You can't just sort of shoot from the hip and say, well, my idea answers question A, B, and C, so let me just offer it. You have to have it substantiated. So you have to have proof you have to substantiate your idea so that it's compelling. But in my opinion, it has to be an original contribution. I mean, there are a lot of books out there. Shlomo Melch says, "Asos svarim harbe ein kates." There's sort of no end to the publishing, so it has to be something original. So the basic guideline is it has to be A, compelling, and B, original. And
I'm sure you have many compelling and original thoughts that didn't make it in, right? Are you saving that for volume 2? I don't mean the second part of Bereishis, but even to do.
Actually, I'm actually in the middle of writing it right now. Yeah.
Okay, I just was checking.
Yeah.
Rabbi Daniel J. Glatstein is our guest. As you heard, he's creative. He's written quite a few books. We've had him on before dealing with the holidays, and he came out with one in Hebrew now called Magid Harakia, dealing from Bereishis to Toldos. He's a Rav of Kehilas Tiferes Mordechai in Cedarhurst, New York.
Yeah.
In your last book, we had you on about the holidays. You had some very interesting stories that went with some of the thoughts that you have. Do you have any interesting stories relating to Bereishis that you also incorporated into the sefer?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, if I may, I think one of the most interesting essays here is from the end of the sefer on Parshas Toldos regarding the Torah viewpoint on parenting, because I think most people think the Torah has a very old age or archaic viewpoint on the type of relationship a parent should have with a child. And what's amazing is if we dig into the most authentic sources, the Torah's concept of parenting is as novel, as progressive as imaginable. I'll give you just a few examples. You know, we're familiar that Rashi picks up on two discrepancies between the way Esav spoke to his father and the way Yaakov spoke to his father. Yaakov said, please. Yaakov also invoked the name of Hashem. Esav never said, please. Esav never invoked the name of Hashem. But Chassam Sofer picks up on another discrepancy. And that is Esav spoke to his dad in a third person. He said, Yakum Avi, will the father get up? Like you talk to a rabbi, you know, you say, does the rabbi? And Yaakov spoke to him second person. He said, Kum Nashava, please get up. He spoke to him directly. And Chassam Sofer says that Jewish people address their parent in much more directly than even the nations of the world. The nations of the world have a certain disconnect between parent and child, and therefore they refer to them in third person. But by the Jewish people, there's such a closeness and such a friendship between child and parent that it's not appropriate for a child to refer to his parent in third person. And this is really remarkable. Remember when Yosef reveals himself to his brothers, and he says, listen, don't sweat it. I know you're worried that I'm going to take revenge. He says, don't worry. Vayesimeni Hashem la'av leparoi. God made me a father to Pharaoh. What does that mean? What did Yosef mean? God made me Pharaoh's Av, father. Rashi there says, Av, what does father mean? Lechaver ulepatron, friend and supporter. Rav Shimon Schwab says, from this Rashi, we see what the Torah's definition of parenting is. The definition of a parent is, am I my kid's best friend? Av is chaver. The definition of Av is chaver. And I think that's very eye-opening. I think most parents, if you'd ask, what's my main responsibility to my child? I have to make sure they go on the right path. I have to set them up in life. I have to teach them etiquette. I have to teach them manners. And Rashi is defining that the main responsibility of a parent is to see to it that they forge a relationship of closeness. And only in that context can you be successful sort of in imparting the values to a child. And one story here that's it's so mind-boggling that in the sefer that I saw it in the new edition of the sefer, they took it out. Probably either they got too much flack or it's too controversial. But I bring it anyway. You're not going to take it out of your sefer, right? No. But I knew how to put it in. I wrote that it was taken out of the original sefer probably because it would be misunderstood. So that's how I painted it. But it's a story about from Rabbi Gamliel Rabinovich, who's one of the leading Kabbalists in Yerushalayim today. He's the Rosh Hashiva of Shar HaShamayim, but he's also an address for many parents who have kids at risk. So he's very familiar with the current attitude of teens and their challenges and so forth. And he said that his mother told him that if the 10 Commandments were written today, now that alone is like heresy. What do you mean if the 10 Commandments were written today? It would not say honor your father and mother. It would say honor your son and daughter. That's what his mother. Now, Ram Gamliel Rabinovich is a Yushalmi Yid. He's definitely of Haredi persuasion. And he says that if from his mother, this goes back 100 years, that if the 10 Commandments were today, now, of course, that doesn't mean there's no mitzvah of honoring your father and mother, but we live in a generation where kids need the respect from their parents. And listen to what he says. He says that in the vast majority of cases where children are contemplating maybe taking a different path than their parents, the vast majority of cases is because they don't feel the parent values them. And he says, this is amazing. When God comes to Abraham, he says, Abraham, go to the Akedah. What does Abraham say? Hineni. What does Hineni mean? Rashi says, a language of humility, a language of prepared to do the bidding of God. When Yitzchak turns to Abraham, he says, hey, Dad, Avi, where are you taking me? What does Abraham say? Hineni, behold, here I am. The same language of humility that Abraham used to speak to the Almighty, Abraham used to speak to his son. Says Ram Gamliel, from here we learn that the same aniva, same humility a human being has to have before God, a parent should have to their child if they want their child to follow in their path and to listen to them. And he says there is no doubt the reason why Abraham was successful in raising a child of the caliber of Yitzchak is because of this manner of humility with which Abraham dealt with Yitzchak. And Yitzchak felt the value his father gave him and the courtesy his father gave him, and Yitzchak continued in the path of Abraham. So I think this is a rather new age parenting idea that's found in the traditional sources of our sages.
So what you're saying, because sometimes you hear conflicting things when parenting, where they say the parents should have to have a certain amount of respect for the kid. They shouldn't be too chummy, too buddy, which you have today in society. What you're saying is that the parents have to be buddy with their kids.
I'm not saying it. This
what
is
you're
what,
quoting. Right?
Yeah. That's what I'm.
And there's nothing wrong if you say that. If you're saying that it should be close. In fact, I'm reminded, and I know you don't cover it in your sefer, you only go through Toldos, but when Yosef HaTzadik, Joseph the Righteous, when he was about to sin with the wife of Potiphar, he saw the image of his father, which meant that he was close to his father. The father was in his thoughts. So when he was about to do something which would go against his family's values, the visage of his father came to him because of the closeness to his father.
Absolutely. That's a very important idea. At the end of the day, in the 11th hour, what saved Yosef's life it wasn't fear of God, it wasn't religiosity, it wasn't some kind of, it was, he doesn't want to let his parents down. He doesn't want to let his father down. And it's very important for a parent to have that type of relationship with his child, that the child considers that in their course in life.
No, that's so important. Relationships is what Bereishis is all about, right? It's some are good and some some of them were not so good. Listen, how each of the patriarchs had to deal with their own travails. You have Avram had to deal with Yishmael, he had banished from the house. You have Yitzchak dealing with Esav. You have Yaakov dealing with jealousy of his kids. So the Torah's whole dealing with parenting and how to deal with it and what you shouldn't do, and that's not afraid to show the bad examples of where even some of the greatest leaders, the patriarchs, made mistakes of dealing with children.
So we have a tightrope when we're dealing with Bereishis in terms of, we have to view the patriarchs through the prism of our sages. We have to be very careful not to conjecture or
but this is Chazal. They say Yaakov, a parent shouldn't favor one kid over the other. That's Chazal.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, Rashi himself says that when Lavan catches up with Yaakov Avinu, so they had this big meal, and Yaakov called his brothers. So Rashi said, what brothers? Yaakov doesn't have brothers. Rashi says the same idea. His children were like his brothers, Chida points out, you want to be successful in raising children? Treat your adult children like brothers, not like children. He even says, Hine ma tova manom shevas achim gam. Achim gam, he says, numerically valued at banav, your children. Treat your children like they're your brothers, then you have a shot, maybe they'll listen to you. On the other hand, when Yaakov prays, he says, my God, the God of Abraham, my father, and the God of Isaac. And he doesn't say of Isaac, my father. He does says Avraham was more Yaakov's father, because Avraham used to call Yaakov Beni, 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 my son, my son. Yitzchak did, the only person Yitzchak called Beni
was Esau. He never called Yaakov my son.
So you see that Yitzchak seemed to have a closer relationship with Esau, but Avraham forged a very close relationship with Yaakov, and Yaakov felt it, and Yaakov referred to God as the God of Abraham, his father. So,
but the Torah is not afraid to tell you exactly how it is and how it was.
Yeah,
and it's there for us to learn. Listen, parents tend to make mistakes, and the Torah is not afraid to show that even the greatest of us did things which Chazal can say we should learn from to do differently.
Yeah.
These are important lessons from Bereishis. Go on, you were saying, Rabbi.
Yeah, the Torah is like a magnifying glass. The Navi Amos says, "Rak eschem yadati mikol mishpachas adama." I only love the Jewish people, and therefore God always points out our flaws. But his pointing out our flaws is a sign of his love. It's like, I give an example. If you're walking with your kid down the street, you say, hey kid, why do you have a little stain on your shirt? Meanwhile, some kid across the street, his whole shirt is full of dirt. You don't say anything because you don't care as much. You want your child to be perfect. So because God loves us so much, he's always pointing out our flaws because of his love for us. He wants us to be perfect. It's a display of his love for the Jewish people.
Well, we could, talk about, and I'm sure we'll have to have you back for a future broadcast. There's so many parenting ideas. There's one idea that I love from Bereishis. I have to see if it's in your sefer or not. Dealing with Yishmael, they said Yishmael was somebody who engaged in archery, and God was with him. So what does it say? God was with him. I don't know if it was Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky or some other Rav said that sometimes we have an idea for our kids. We want them to be a doctor. We want them to be a lawyer. But sometimes you let the kids go and do what they do best. In the case of Yishmael, archery was what he did best. So God was with him, even though he may not be the profession that maybe the family would have wanted him to be. This is what he excelled in, and you encourage your kids to go into what they excel in.
Yeah, Chanuch Lenar al pi darko, and Reb Shamshin Hirsch famously says that the reason Esav took a wrong turn is because they tried to groom him in the same direction as Yaakov, and he wasn't cut out for that type of lifestyle of scholarship. But look, it all goes back to Bereishis. Bereishis is the handbook of all life, marriage, parenting, relationship between all family members, relationship with God. It all starts with the beginning. Speaking of relationships, talk to me about Timnah, because Timnah seems to be the mother. She is the mother, so to speak, of our arch enemies, Amalek. But according to the Medrash, she wanted to really be part of the Abrahamic family. I'm not sure how she could have gone to both Abraham, to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Timnah is a fascinating story. She was like she was in prestige, but she said she wanted to be like a concubine to Abraham. Abraham rejected her, and Reb Chaim Shmulevitz brings out that the venom of rejection, the poison that one feels by being rejected, is so insidious. It's so vicious that it sprouted into Amalek, and we always have to be careful. When we say no to people and we reject them, we have to be aware of the possible consequences. The feeling of rejection is the most painful feeling in this world. And look what happened to her, So much we can learn from
what you're writing, and so much we can learn from Bereishis-Genesis. Our guest is Rabbi Daniel J. Glatstein. His latest sefer. You have two Maggid Rekiyas, right? One on Bereishis. You have
Yes,
another one.
we have a Maggid Rekiyah Bereishis. So Shemos is coming out. We also have on Purim and on the Haggadah. So we'll have to have a number of future discussions. But
Absolutely. No, it's fascinating. I like your thoughts are very refreshing, original, and the book is called Maggid Rekiyah. Where can people get a hold of the book?
okay, so the sefer is available in in all your better Sfarim stores, carry, and it's available online as well. You could go to our site, rabbidg.com, and you could order it there, and with free shipping, and get it in time for the next parsha, Noach. And if I could end with really one very beautiful, powerful thought, Noach is introduced with a whole intro, Matzachim B'nei Hashem, is tzaddik, amen. We give his whole resume, everything he ever did. And the end of Noach, we have this family, our Pachshad and Terach and Nachar and Abraham. And Vayir Hashem al Avram. Who is the guy? We just said 20 names. Why him? Is he a tzaddik? Doesn't say. Is he a tamim? Doesn't say. Is he Matzachim B'nei Hashem? Doesn't say a word about. There's nothing given for the resume of Avraham Avinu. It's very interesting. Noach gets all these accolades, and Avraham, God speaks, and we have no idea why. So the Maharal says this is literally the most hopeful observation on the whole Torah, because when God spoke to Avraham and selected him, he's selecting Klal Yisrael, the Jewish people. If it would have said Abraham was a tzaddik, he was a charitable and full of kindness, then you would have thought, you know why God selected the Jewish people? Because of A, B, C. It's a love dependent on something. And what's going to be in the year 2022 when we don't have these qualities? Maybe God won't love us anymore. So God specifically say, I spoke to Abraham. Why? Just because it's intrinsic. The love God has for the Jewish people is not because of any quality, characteristic, good deed. It's eina tluya b'davar. It's not dependent on anything. It's inherent, and therefore it's immutable and it's eternal. And it's a really beautiful idea.
Beautiful idea. I have to have you back because I think Noach gets a bad rap, at least for some of us, right? So I'll close with this in our conversation because I love the thought. I think Rashi usually goes by his first opinion, and he puts down Yesh Me Rabbeinu. Some of our rabbis say that Noach was to be complimented. He lived in the time of Avram, been even greater. Then he says Yesh. There's some that say he lived in the time of Avram, nothing. But it's interesting that he doesn't call them Rabbi Hussein, doesn't call them rabbis that have the negative opinion. He only calls Rabbi Hussein rabbis that have the positive opinion. I love that diuk, that way of looking at Rashi, because he's careful in what he says. We always have to judge people in the favorable light, and when you have a choice to be negative or positive, I think we should always err in being positive. I think that's the message that Rashi is trying to give us.
Okay, yeah. Tonight is very good.
Anyway, Rabbi Daniel J. Glatstein, thank you for joining with us. We appreciate your being here. Look forward to having you back. And Hanukkah's right around the corner, so we're going to light up the candles, right?
Looking forward to our next discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you for tuning in to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast, the pulse beat of the Jewish community.
For continuous Jewish programs, TalklineNetwork.com, or our 24-hour-a-day listen line at 641-741-0389. For past shows, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, Instagram, and all major podcast platforms, or jewishpodcast.org. Thanks for listening to the TalklineNetwork.com.